phase. So thank you all so much for being here. It is my pleasure to meet in person after several nice phone conversations, Mayor Steve Myers of Pacific, who will talk about who is our neighbor in Pacific and where would Jesus be there so that we know where we should be. Thank you so much for being here.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for having me.
Uh-oh. Oh, no.
No, what?
I messed us up. I just have to. Oh, no.
Are they still there?
Yep, they're still there. It's all good.
We just can't see them, but they can see us.
Yes, they can see and hear you.
Can they speak to me?
Through me.
Okay.
Or the spirit.
All right. So they're.
I'm gonna do one thing that'll make this all a lot easier. I'm gonna switch my account. 1 second.
So I did learn that if I stand up, my head goes away. So on the screen. So I thought it best if I'd go ahead and sit down, if you all don't mind. All right. Otherwise, I would pace in front of you a little bit. That's just my style. But we'll skip that tonight or today. But I do want to thank you for having me. I'm going to drop this mask if that's all right. Is there anybody offended by that? Let me know now. All right. So there's so many facts and details in this that I did take some notes. So I'm going to refer to them once in a while. But if you look up the origins of the word Pacific, it means peace. And I don't know if you all know, but the origins of the word Myers means mayor, which really blew my mind when we learned that. And I call it fate or destiny, whatever you want to call it. But I believe that we've answered a call that God has placed in my mind and heart, and that we're actually doing the will of God in this role that we've got. And it's been one of the most rewarding things I've ever taken on. And the progress that our city of Pacific has made over the last 3 years has just been astounding when you look at the list. And I won't go through the list of things. Maybe you'll get to see that someday down the road. But my wife and I are both 4th generation Pacific. So our relations had been part of the settlement, the early settlers of Pacific, which I think is exciting in itself and probably quite rare that we'd have 2 families that come together like that 4 generations later. But I've served as alderman for 5 years and mayor now for 3. And I believe that the city's on the right track for progress and development and growth. I don't know if you've followed Pacific politics or Pacific's progress through the years, but we've had our humps that we've had to overcome. Been a little bit of a roller coaster ride in some aspects, but I think right now we're in a very good place. And so I want to try to help keep it there. I was specifically asked to answer 2 questions here today. So I'm going to try to stick to that. The first question is, who is it that I serve? So I brought you quite a long list of demographics, all right, so that you understand completely what the snapshot of Pacific is if there was a picture taken of it. So we were incorporated back in 1859. Been around a long time. With the land area now is 6 square miles, and growing. We've got 2020, we annexed 370 acres alone, just in 2020. So there's a lot of interest in the part of landowners and developers into buying plots of ground and bringing them into the city and then developing it. So there's a lot of really good, cool projects coming very soon. We just did 47 more acres finalized last Tuesday night. And that was of a farm that was surrounded by Pacific, but just for whatever reason had never come in. And so I talked to the landowner and I said, hey, it's time. And he agreed. And so now they're part of the city, actually. Population estimates in 2019 were 7,245. If you look at the sign going into town from any direction, it says 7,002. So they give some estimates of what the growth might have been. And we're hopeful in this last census that it's going to be even more than what they have predicted. But it's kind of interesting that back in the 2010 census, they changed the rules a little bit. And they took in the population of the prison. Okay, so the prison is in the city of Pacific. And so that moved us from 6,002 to 7,002 roughly. So suddenly we became one of the fastest growing communities in all of Missouri and maybe the nation. And it skewed our single male population very high, as well as low income. All right, so our numbers are messed up a little bit. But the truth of the matter is that Merrimack Valley R3 serves 27,000 people. Just not in the city limits of Pacific, but all of the surrounding communities. There's 27,000 that call Pacific home. They get upset if the city does something wrong. You know, they'll be one of the first to let us know, hey, you're messing with my hometown. You know, so they are very passionate about Pacific, and they shop there. Their kids go to school there, of course. They go to church there. So they're very much active participants in Pacific, and to not count them, I think, is misleading. So we think that our population is much larger than what's on the sign. We're ranked 106th largest city in Missouri and the 3,882nd largest in the nation. I don't know what that qualifies us for, but I thought it was an interesting statistic nonetheless. 83% are high school graduates, and only 16% are bachelor's or higher. I found that troubling, you know, but then you look at the statistics that we've got like 4,500 registered voters, and only 6.2% of them turned out to vote in the last election. That's discouraging too. And I'm not here to give you discouraging news, but I just want to paint a truthful picture. You know, there's a lot of apathy in our community, and there's a lot of people that'll sit back and let a lot of other people do the work, and they'll reap the benefits of it. You know, and I really want to call out people to become a part and participate. Don't just watch the parade go by, jump in and join it. That's sometimes difficult to do. And I don't care what organization you're in, you know, there's that 80-20 rule that 20% of the people do 80% of the work, right? And it's like that in our community as well. We also are 92% white, 5% Black, and 3% Hispanic. So another statistic, 2,642 homes with a median value of $144,000. We have 426 businesses. We have an average income of $58,700 with a poverty rate of 14.69%. The religious statistics, which I thought was interesting, you have evangelical Protestants, 22.4%, which I would think that this group would qualify as being a part of that.
We're not evangelical.
But Protestant.
We are.
Okay, because that's the only statistic for Protestants.
Got it.
Mainline Protestant.
No, that's us. We're
Okay,
mainline.
well, they're 6.4%
Yeah.
then. Catholics are about 18%. Other, and I'm not sure what that is, but 1% are other religious. So it might be Jehovah's Witness, or I'm not sure. But no religion. This one stood out to me. Anyone want to take a guess? Very close, 51.9%. No religion. So there's the old story of these two shoe salesmen that got sent to Africa, one to the East Coast and one to the West Coast at the same time. And they, one of them wrote back to the office, "No one wears shoes here. There's no business." And the other one at the same time wrote back, "No one wears shoes here. Send me all the inventory you got. It's a great market." Right? So it's the same with that, you know, with no, yes, ma'am.
Do your statistics include any information at all about anybody Jewish or Muslim or Sikh or any non-Christian religion?
So the question is, are there any non-Christian religions in the statistics that I have, such as Muslims or Jews, or that might be in the other qualification? I would assume that it is because it didn't list them specifically. But I do know there's a Jewish rabbi that lives in Pacific.
Thank you.
It's a friend of mine. Yeah, great guy. But I don't know that breakdown. I don't know it. So that's some of the demographics of the city. And the second question that was asked was, where would Jesus be among those you serve? So that made me think of the Bible passage that talks about how Jesus worked with the least of these. So the tax collector and the prostitutes and people you would consider undesirables, right? A lot of times the folks that are poor are considered the undesirables. So I want to believe that Jesus would not be siding with a party. Jesus would be siding with the poor. It wouldn't be a hero in today's terms, some athlete and his beliefs, or Hollywood and their beliefs, or values, or lack thereof. It would be God's values. And what God values is taking care of the people who are not able to take care of themselves. So if I were to say, okay, we want to go out and we want to find Jesus, I think Jesus would be hanging out with the people who really need the help. And so for me, it is we've already mentioned people in poverty, which we've also said is just under 15% of our population. There's people those are typically renters, okay, because they can't afford their own home. We have $695, I want to say, is the average rental cost. All right, and some of these people are unemployed. And where they get that money, some people are behind in their rent. You always hear those stories. There's a ministerial alliance in Pacific that will help them with a month or maybe two to try to get them to where they can get reestablished. But month, maybe two comes and goes, and now what? And then that gets shut off. There's different levels of state aid that they can achieve. Many of them need to be led to that well. Some of them refuse to go. We see children in foster care because of these split families. That's something that's near and dear to Lori and my heart. And I've served on the board for CASA, Franklin County CASA, which serves Franklin County and Gasconade County. I've served on their board for 3 years. So I know the foster care problem very well. There are right now about 419 kids in foster care in Franklin, Gasconade counties, most of them in Franklin County, and a large percent of them in the Merrimack Valley R3 school district. So we actually felt passionate enough about it to go ahead and take the training and become CASAs ourselves, which stands for Court Appointed Special Advocate. And that's where you get involved in a family's life, or the children's life, and you become their advocate or their spokesman. We become the voice of the child to the judge. We learn over the course of months, maybe even years, what this specific family situation is, what these children have gone through, and what their real options are, and what their wishes are. And that's something that we then advocate to the judge. But there's a real need there as far as helping these foster children. I said 419 cases, but there's only 250 CASAs, trained CASAs that work with them. So there's many, many children that don't have that help. In terms of homeless, you've got a homeless population in the Grace Summit area that's heavy. And then in Pacific, we have it. We know it's there. For a living, what I do is I'm I'm almost on a daily basis up at about 90 feet in the air on a billboard sign. So I'll do graphics and production and installation of billboards on the highways. And I was in a particular one in Gray Summit. And from my bird's eye view, I saw a tent down below me. And there at the tent, outside underneath the fly, just the covering when you come out the door, there was a gentleman that was tying up some fly knots, to make sure his place survived the wind. There was a lady inside. She was sweeping out the tent floor, taking care of their place. And then I saw him go over to a local restaurant that's right in their backyard, but it was the restaurant, the parking lot of the restaurant, and then a grove of trees that hid his tent. And that's where this family was living. So the homeless population are here. I know there's a tent city that's in the woods, hidden from sight in Gray Summit. I've had opportunity to be on the river, and you're floating along the Merrimack, and there's some stretches where you can see crude shelters and tents, that type of thing, but they're not in very good shape. But there's evidence that there's homeless people living along the river, but they want to get out of sight, and because of out of sight, they're also out of mind, largely. And there's an organization called Safety Net. And Safety Net, they help provide for homeless children to make sure that these kids they have as normal a school life experience as what they can possibly have. So there's great needs, shoes and clothing. And it could be as simple as a little girl would want to be on the cheerleading squad, and there's just no way that she could afford the uniform, no way that she could afford to go to the camps, the cheerleading camps, to learn the trade or the skills involved. And so Safety Net will step into these children's lives, and they will provide for those kinds of experience so that little kid can have a somewhat of a respectable school experience. I think that's a tremendous outreach. So Safety Net, there's CASA, there's the Ministerial Alliance itself, in terms of they help to provide not only for those rents we talked about, but also for the utility bills, so that they don't get their gas shut off or lose their electric in the winter. And I know that with COVID, there's also these companies that are working with to stop people from having those things happen, or stopping people from being evicted. And there's some extra money is there to help. But that's the least of these, in my perspective, on where would Jesus be? He'd be working right there. So are there any kind of questions that any of you have for me?
I'm so grateful. I love this I'm so grateful for your real picture, your pride and your optimism in growth and all that's
Occurring in Pacific, that's
positive, but also the reality, like your compassionate heart and honesty in naming where the broken folks are. I'm so grateful for that. I've been taking notes. I missed the statistics you had on population. You mentioned there's a certain percentage of Hispanic, and could you mention that again? I missed
Sure.
it.
We have about 95% is white, or no, excuse me, 92%, 5% Black and 3% Hispanic.
Can you tell me a little bit about the role of Agape House, and if there are any other organizations like that? What kind of services do they provide, and so on?
Well, Agape House has been around for a long time,
Yeah.
and they do a remarkable job providing low-cost clothing and like pots and pans, and I don't know what
Household goods.
household goods. Thank you. Tools and that type of thing that are donated to them, and then they take and repair some things and put it back on the shelves. And they have a very strong flow of folks coming in and purchasing from them, as well as there's a food side of it. And so folks, they have to qualify with income and proof of their lack of income, and then they can buy on a weekly basis their food items. So that is a very successful program that's going on in Pacific. And as far as other organizations in Pacific area, I know that there's food pantries in some of the churches, because through scouting for food, we've delivered to a couple different locations for churches that provide food items. But I'm not sure about any other that provides clothing items. Let me take this question first, Linda.
Oh, thank you. You mentioned CASA is a source for you and the organization that helps. And then there was you mentioned another one that helped out with rent for a couple of months. And could you name that for me?
That's a ministerial alliance.
Okay.
Mhm.
The Agape House also does.
Yes, ma'am, Donna.
I was wondering if, I know that Queen, Missouri was voted in by almost 2/3 majority of Missouri. And in it was to get to buy into the Medicaid, which the governor now is not doing. Would that have helped your people? Because I know I was sitting in a doctor's office sometime, reading a magazine, and they said the 10 most poverty-stricken congressional districts in the United States. Well, I get to one, and it's Southeast Missouri. I was flabbergasted. And they said how poor it is, and they don't have medical care and everything. Would this help that district if we expanded Medicaid?
Well, I'm sure that anytime that you're expanding healthcare access, it's going to help. But I will say that the foster family that Lori and I have been assigned to, all 4 of those children are able to get free healthcare because they're on a state program. And so there's programs out there that are very capable of providing for the healthcare for the poor.
Well, we had my granddaughter's in a wheelchair, and she had caregivers. One of the caregivers was a wonderful woman, and that was her job to just do that.
Mhm.
But since she was making over $1,000 or something a month, she was not, they took away her Medicaid.
Hmm.
So, and she had like Crohn's disease or something, so she could not help our granddaughter any longer. She had to go out and get a job or something.
Hmm.
And I know that it does, the expanded Medicaid is helping so many people, like in West Virginia and stuff like that. The other thing I wanted to ask is about what is the drug usage in that area? Is that always seems to accompany poverty and low income and stuff.
Right, and that's where you see it.
Yeah.
It is uncomfortably high amongst the poor. So you've got 14.9% poverty rate. You probably have very similar drug use. I haven't seen that statistic, but I would assume that it's very close because those folks are prone to depression. They're prone to wanting to escape their realities. And that's one alternative. And unfortunately, there are highs that you can buy for low amounts of money. I have a tough time understanding what drives people to want to escape their realities rather than just change them and get out of it. Because I'll tell you, we struggled in the past, and it's not a fun time to be in your life, but you have a choice. You're either going to work yourself out of it, which we've done, or you're going to just succumb to it.
Well, in our family, my husband's ex-wife was a alcoholic. 2 of the kids are really bad with alcoholism. But I took a course to work at the prison, and one of the ministers there was saying that these people grow up in a drug house. That is their norm.
Mhm.
That is, and some of it, like alcoholism, is genetic. It's not a choice.
Mhm.
And so he says when they get out of prison,
Mhm.
they go back to the drug house because that is what, and that's the only thing they know. They don't grow up in a, like I call it, our utopian society, my household.
Right.
And I talked to one of our kids and I said, where would you be if you did not have the support group we have? He says, I said, would you be out in the streets? He says, no, I wouldn't will.
Mhm.
So those people don't have support groups. They don't have.
Right. And it's not just the drug addicts. It's any of these abusive behavior patterns that folks have that they've seen it. They've had it modeled for them all their life, and their dad before them abused mom, grandpa, whatever, was an alcoholic. And you see these patterns, these cycles, and it someday, somehow, one adult intervening in that child's life to show them a different way to break that cycle, that is crucial to being able to help stop this pattern and this repetitiveness.
Is there a way to get a rehab center down there, or where's the closest? How do you deal with that?
Well, there's ways, but you have to have money. You have to have volunteers. And that's the challenge.
How could St. Francis best partner with Pacific and the people of Pacific? I'll say during the intense cold in February, the number of people who came here, I've heard from nobody since it's been warmer, but the number of people in that intense cold who came looking for help with a place to stay was overwhelming. I mean, it's evident there's no homeless shelter, or
Right.
it's a tent, or calling a church to see if you could go to the Best Western for a few nights.
Exactly.
So that sort of screamed to me
Mhm. Well,
as a place of need. But how can we best partner with Pacific?
okay, so if homeless, you've got all these different categories that you could help. And homeless, if you want to help there specifically, there's an organization called Safety Net that I mentioned. And Safety Net it's to identify the organization is a little bit difficult. It is not at the moment a 501c3. It's run by the school district. Okay. And they have found grant money to help staff the organization that helps with homeless children to give them that normal experience through school. However, they're more than that. They will help on a small scale for utilities, that type of thing, if they can. However, they're on a very limited budget. So helping Safety Net financially would be great. And I want to tell you, one of the meetings I attended, they talked about their long-term vision of having a homeless facility to where they could take somebody that is in an urgent need, and they would have this housing that would be a temporary fix. It's not going to be long-term, and these folks can't get used to living there because they want it to be to where it's a revolving kind of thing. I heard the need. I know of a home in Pacific that is in probate court right now. The gentleman that owned it died, left it to his son who lives in the country, in another country. I'll just say that, not to give specifics. Lives in another country and really doesn't want it, but it's tied up in the courts. All right. So we're trying to work towards where the city can help get it free from the courts, acquire this property that's a troubled, it's got so many code violations and ordinance violations that we're trying to see if we can help that. But to make it ultimately to where we can give it as a gift to Safety Net, and there would be an organization such as the Ministerial Alliance that could run the program. They're very interested. I went and shared with them just a week ago. So we're trying to get that homeless shelter set up to where people would have a place to go on a temporary basis to get back up on their feet and able to go. And then there would be a program to try to help them do that swiftly. Okay,
You also said that there's some.
let me get this young lady here.
Patty,
I wonder,
Kathleen.
you didn't mention about the flooding, when you all
Mhm.
get flooding, that is a real, that's very hard for Pacific, isn't it?
Absolutely. But fortunately, we're making progress there. There has been, the floods back in, I want to say it's 92. There was, just a general, oh man, and then they cleaned up and they rebuilt and that type of thing. Well, fast forward to 2015. Right now, people are like, how often is this going to come? 2015. And there was many of the homeowners then that decided we want to find a way out. A lot of them are the lower income. They may have inherited that place, that dwelling place, and that's all, they have a property tax bill to pay every year. And that's the extent of their housing expense, other than utilities. It was the most affordable place for them to stay. But now here comes the river for a visit, and suddenly they lose everything that they own. Devastating. All right, so FEMA, fortunately, at the time, offered what the fair market value would be of that house if it wasn't damaged. Okay, it's the absolute best possible price these folks could get, and many of them took the buyout. Many of them didn't. They're like, oh no, it's been since the early 90s since it's flooded before. It'd be a long time. Well, here comes 2017. Another, well, 2017 was just shy of hitting the record of 2015. Another devastating flood. And so many of each of these floods soften hearts a little bit more. And these folks are like, I'm done. So we have right now undergone demolition of probably 20 properties in the flood zone. So again, we talk about these cycles, and the cycle of devastation in these people's lives was staggering. And we wanted to help them break free of that cycle of repetitive loss. The insurance companies, FEMA provides most of the insurance for, or all of the insurance actually for flood prone properties. And they want to get out of the cycle of repetitive loss. So that's something the federal government down the road is going to force. I see it happening. And these houses are going to either have to be lifted up above flood zone, or they're going to have to be torn down. Someday that's in the cards. Right now, it's still the property owner's choice. All right, so we've experienced a large number of people who are now willing to go ahead and sell their properties. FEMA buys them, working with the CDBG for the state level, and they also work with the city to get it done. We are actually the facilitator of it. We make it happen. It's not the city money that is involved. But to stop that cycle of repetitive loss, we're making good ground. And those folks then can take the money and they can go build on a high ground. Much, much better.
Doris?
Doris, do you have a question?
Yes,
Okay.
no,
I just wanted to make sure you were included if you wanted to be.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
For your time with us. Does anybody else have another question before I need to wrap up?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead.
No, quickly, I just wanted you to know that the Merrimack Valley School District, we've had a long special connection with through one of their teachers, our members, and the kids from those elementary, middle, and high school have been among the people that we tutor here for a number of years. COVID kind of messed that up.
Mhm.
But anyway, they've been a good part of that, as well as the Rockwood, because we are physically in the same area. And it's been a real gift to St. Francis to bring these kids together. And your cousin Paul had a little group of 6th grade math students for about 3 years. Well, first they were sixth graders and fifth graders. But anyway, that were a blend of the 3 school districts, and he taught all 3 of these kids at the same time. Anyway, that was typical, and it was a gift to us to be able to serve that population in that way.
Fantastic.
Sorry, Laura.
Oh, no, it's okay, Cheryl, our position.
It was fun when I first arrived here, seeing Paul, seeing Marion and Chris, and just thinking, what a great congregation you all must have, because I know these folks are top-notch quality.
And we even have a lady who participates in the CASA program. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
She's here. She's one of our first.
Well, you know, if you don't mind me promoting CASA again, just a little bit, I'll just tell you that there's a great need for volunteers. And if you ever hear somebody, or you yourself think, I've got some time that I could devote to helping a child through the foster experience, by all means, just contact me and let me know, and send them to me. You can just Google Mayor Steve Myers and my Facebook will pop right up.
He's in my contacts now too. And I bet
There you
Mary
go.
is Kinder, so.
Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody. I've
Thank
enjoyed
you
sharing with you.
all so very much for being here. Thank you, Mayor Myers. I really, really appreciate your time. Really do. So we will be in touch. I am confident. Thank you. All right, to our friends. Goodbye, Doris and Elaine and Gina and Al. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
She's